Alrighty, now that we have our camera actually following our player, we can show a really basic technique for creating a background parallax scrolling effect. What that's going to do is it's going to move certain layers in the background a little bit faster or a little bit slower depending on their order in an array that we're going to set. Now, this script or this technique that I'm about to show is actually lifted directly from the Unity 2D uh, platformer like template thing, but fortunately for us, we don't have to make any modifications for it to make it work in our particular game, like we did with a few other the things that we lifted from them. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at that script. The algorithm is really straightforward. So let's go ahead and just create a class, and I'm going to call this background parallax. And it is going to inherit from mono behavior. You'll notice that I actually created a class within Visual Studio and not within Unity this time. That is a perfectly valid thing to do. You don't need to go back into Unity to create C# scripts. However, you do need to make sure that you create a class and you have it inherit from mono behavior. You'll also note that I took off the namespace definition. In Unity, recent versions of Unity, you can use namespaces with your mono behaviors, but it doesn't always work and it's quite buggy. So I just by default take away the namespace and keep all my mono behaviors in the global namespace, which isn't pretty, but it works. All right, so now we have our background parallax mono behavior. Let's go ahead and give it some public properties. What it's going to do effectively is have an array of transforms called backgrounds. These are the background layers that it's going to scroll as the player moves around the world. Now we need a couple other variables to define the behavior of the background parallax. So first we need a parallax scale. Then we need the parallax reduction factor. That's going to be used so basically we have a list of these background transforms. As we get further along in the array, we want them to move a little bit slower because in an actual parallax effect, the things far away from you move slower than the things closer to you. So the parallax reduction factor allows us to make things further away from us scroll a little bit slower. Then we're going to create a public float of smoothing. All right, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add this script to our camera, so we're going to have it work against our camera's transform itself. But we will need to keep a private vector3 of last position, which is the position of the camera in the last frame. We use this in order to know how much we need to scroll the background either forwards or backwards. All right. So the last thing that we need to do before we write our update method is write a start method. And the start method will simply set the last position to transform.position. Again, I'm going to be attaching the script to our camera itself. So we're going to be using last position equals transform.position. Then I'm going to say public void update. And on the update, we're going to perform our parallax effect. It's actually not going to be a whole lot of lines of code. We're going to say var parallax equals the last camera position dot x minus transform position dot x multiplied by the parallax scale. So you see that we're doing what I said before. We're getting the difference between the camera as it is in this frame and the camera as it was in the last frame. And then we're scaling it up or down, I guess you could do, but that wouldn't be very useful, by the parallax scale. So the parallax scale allows us to give more of a parallax effect arbitrarily. Then we enter a for loop. We are simply going to loop through each one of our backgrounds. We're using a for loop instead of a for each loop because we need to access our index variable. And we need to access that index variable in order to know how much to reduce the parallax effect based on how far back of the array that we're going. Okay, now we have to do the background target position. So the background target position is going to be backgrounds at I dot position dot x plus the parallax, which we defined up there as the difference between the last camera's position and our camera position as of the moment, multiplied by our parallax scale, or scaled by our parallax scale. Of course, anytime you say multiply, you could just change it or say scale instead. And then we're also going to multiply it by the reduction factor. But the reduction factor is going to get larger as we move on inside of our loop. And we're also going to add 1 to this in the case of I being 0 or parallax reduction factor being 0, so that we always multiply it by 1. Because if we didn't multiply it by 1, if I were to be 0 or parallax reduction factor were to be 0, this entire expression would be 0. And if it's 0, then we're not moving the position by anything, and obviously we wouldn't see any noticeable effect. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to set its background, its position. So we'll say backgrounds at I dot position equals vector 3 dot lerp from backgrounds at I dot position to a new vector 3 of the background target position in the x, and then the background backgrounds.I.position.y and backgrounds at I.position.z. So that's what we're moving towards. And I'll go ahead and full screen this, and I'm also going to break this out into multiple lines. So the first parameter of the lerp, so this is going to be the to parameter, or sorry, this is going to be the from parameter. This is going to be the to parameter. And then the final parameter is going to be our smoothing factor multiplied or scaled by the amount of seconds that have passed since the last frame. The last thing we need to do is simply say last position equals transform.position. So all we're doing is we're moving the background forward by parallax times I times parallax reduction factor plus 1. Alrighty, so I'll remove those comments too because they're kind of ugly. So now that we have this background parallax, how do we use it? Well, first of all, the background parallax is based on the position of itself, meaning we're going to have to add it to the camera because we're parallaxing based off the camera. So let's go ahead and go out of full screen and jump into Unity. We'll click on our main camera and we'll add a new script to it. We'll say parallax, background parallax. Now before we fill our backgrounds with things, let's go ahead and give the parallax scale to like 2, a parallax reduction factor of 4, and a smoothing of 3. We can play around with those parameters however we want. Okay, let's go ahead and create 2 mountain ranges and a tree line. So what I want to do is I want to create 2 mountain ranges, one that'll be a little bit bigger than the other, and then, actually, will that even look good, Steve? I kind of want to have 3 layers though. Should I just do 2 layers of trees, or should I do 2 layers of mountains?
Well, I was originally going to have the 2 different color mountains be parallax separately.
Okay, so we can do that, and then we can do a tree line?
Yeah, I like that idea.
Alrighty, so to keep everything nice and clean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a empty game object, and I'm going to call it backgrounds. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create our 3 parallax layers as children of backgrounds. I'm also going to take background and make it a child of background. Let's go ahead and delete all of my mountains, my blue, my teal, my blue. I think that's everything. And let's go ahead and delete our tree as well. So now we have no backgrounds right now, and the game kind of looks sterile. So let's go ahead and now create our 3 levels of parallax. I'm going to say create empty game object, and I'm going to create, the first layer is going to be teal mountains. The second empty game object, which I'm going to make underneath teal mountains, I'm going to call blue mountains. And the third game object I'm going to create is called trees. So I have teal mountains, blue mountains, and trees. And I want all of my objects to exist within these. All of my objects that I'm going to parallax. I'm also going to go ahead and set all of their positions to 0, 0, 0. Just because I think that would look a little nicer. I'm also going to set my backgrounds position to 0, 0, 0. Which of course, unfortunately, moves our actual background, but I can bring the background back by resetting it to 0, 0, 0. So I'm zeroing out all these transforms just because although these game objects are really just there as a way to group together, we're kind of treating these game objects like folders in a sense. I really don't want to run into any weird positioning issues, and I also want to keep things as clean as possible. So by setting them to the origin, I just get a much nicer feeling than if I were to not have set them at the origin. Although, pretty much makes no difference. All right, let's start by placing our teal mountains, which will have... Our teal mountains should be all the way at the back, right? Because they're a little... because of the color. Steve has a problem with muting himself.
Yeah, they should. I do. I constantly mute myself and forget I'm there. Yeah, I guess technically if we're going to go with atmospheric depth, the teal ones would be the furthest back.
Alrighty, so let's open up our texture atlas main and grab our thing. Oh no, it's in BG Atlas. Sorry. All right, open up BG Atlas and grab our teal and bring it out. And then I'm going to position this at 0, 0, 0. And then I'm going to snap it up a little bit like that. And how big do you want me to make this, Steve?
I think pretty good size.
What, like, you're thinking like that? I don't know if it's updated for you yet.
Yeah, that's about perfect.
All
that way
right.
you'll still have. That way, if they're climbing platforms, they'll still have something besides just sky behind them.
Alrighty. So let's go ahead and take mountains teal, and I'm going to child it to the teal mountains. Then what I'm going to do is come up to my sorting layer and place it on backgrounds, and then keep order and layer as 0. Now that I've done that, let's just go ahead and duplicate this a bunch. I mean, how do you want me to duplicate this? Do you want me to just have them separated, or do you want me to have them overlap?
Yeah, I'd give them a little random separation.
Okay, so something like that. Those are huge. I'm worried about the blurriness, actually, because you can kind of start to see the pixels because of how big they are.
Yeah, take them down a little bit then.
But you'll yell at me if I do that.
Well, take them down a little bit. That'll do. I mean, they're still coming almost halfway up the screen. That works.
Yeah, they are pretty big. But I guess they're mountains. Mountains are supposed to be big. Okay, so we now have our teal mountains layer done. Let's work on our blue mountains. So I'm going to bring in mountain blue and start it off at 0, 0, 0. Move it up. And then make it a little bit bigger, but they're going to be smaller than the teal mountains. Okay, so now I have my teal mountains, or my blue mountains. Let's go ahead and set their sorting layer to backgrounds. Let's say their order in layer, let's set the order in layer to 1, so that they'll always appear in front of these teal mountains. Then, I want to take this mountains blue, and I want to child it to blue mountains. So now I'll do that. And then I'll do that. I'll do that. And then, think that looks good?
Yeah, that works for me.
All right. Okay, so now we have our blue mountains. Let's go ahead and bring in our trees. I believe I made a tree prefab. Did I? Yeah, I did. I don't know why I made a tree prefab, but I did. Okay, so let's bring in our...
You got a little prefab crazy for a minute there.
Yeah, I really did.
But it's not the worst thing to do.
Yeah. All right, let's zero that out. Let's make them a little bit... Oh, no, let's not rotate them. Let's make them a little bit bigger. and a little bit higher, something like that.
Oh, that's perfect.
Right there?
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. And then we'll do some more trees, and maybe some will appear on top of each other. Maybe I'll change their Z value a little bit to give them some variation. Maybe make this one a little bit smaller, make this one a little bit bigger, and
Yeah,
so
you
on.
can stretch them a little.
All right, just to get some variation. Now, these three trees, I forgot to parent it to or child it to my trees, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. So these three trees are now childed to trees. In addition, also this tree needs to be childed to trees. In addition, I'm also going to select I'm going to go ahead and open up my layers menu, and I'm going to hit a lock on tree line. Because I'm now placing trees everywhere, I want to make sure that I don't accidentally select a tree when I'm really wanting to select something else. But the point is with these little elements, you can definitely make something, if you're, more of an artist than I am, you can definitely make something a little bit more visually appealing and interesting. But at least
I gotta call you out there, buddy.
Hmm?
I gotta call you out there. All of this art was designed for you. I could walk you through how I made this, and then you, in fact, could make this exact beautiful art.
Yeah, that's true, actually. With the, yeah. But though, as far as art goes, placement is also incredibly important. But,
Yeah, but even I screwed that up. So that's like everything else. You try it, and if it's not right, you play with it.
yeah, pretty much. All right, now that we have these guys set up, let's go ahead and build in our parallax. So to do that, I'm going to select the camera, which remember, that's where the parallax, background parallax is. And then I'm just going to add these three objects to my backgrounds array. I'm going to start with my teal mountains, then my blue mountains, then my trees. All right, let's go ahead and hit play and see how this looks. It actually looks pretty cool. It's almost giving me a headache though because the parallax factor is way too much. Parallax.
Really? Is it 10 frames? I can't see it at all. I'm so disappointed. I'm just going to assume you made it really, really pretty. Then I'll watch the recording later.
Let's set our parallax scale to like no, let's set it to 0.1. Yeah, I think
Unless it's a really high-speed game, I prefer the parallax to be as subtle as you can get away with.
yeah. Definitely need to add some more trees though. Yeah, that's it looks like oh, this is giving me a headache. In a cool way actually. We're changing the parallax scale to 0.05 maybe. 0.05 is a little bit too small. Let's change that to 0.09. Of course, this is something that people can tweak to whatever needs they have, in particular, whatever kinds of backgrounds that they might.
Yeah, if you're doing an endless runner instead of a platformer where you're rushing across screens, it's going to be higher. But tweaking's the name of the game development world. God, I can only see it in chunks. It's making me so sad. I can see just enough to tell it's happening.
All right, but yeah, you can definitely tweak this to whatever you want. The point is it does work, and these three parameters will give you a lot of control over how you want your game to work. Actually, I kind of like that. 0.512. 0.512. I think that looks good. It is very subtle, but it does give you the very slight impression that those things are far away and at different. Well, actually, maybe. Wow, I can just sit here and tweak this for hours, can't I?
It's almost like gameplay itself.
Okay, so let's set the parallax reduction factor to 2. There we go. That gives us actually... Yeah, I like that. Yeah, definitely like that. Anyway, the point is, that's background parallax. Very straightforward. Just some really simple math. You can make it more complicated, more configurable by, for example, giving each one of these backgrounds their own parallax scaling factor. Because obviously these trees might not be as far away to those blue mountains as the blue mountains are to the teal mountains. And that might be something we take a look at. But for now, I think that pretty much wraps up the video. And we'll see you guys in the next one.
All right.